The number one cause that participants reported for interruptions, both external and internal, was email. We found that our study participants averaged checking their inboxes 74 times a day, replicating a year later in another study where we logged the computer activity of 40 people for 12 workdays and found that they checked their email an average of 77 times a day. One dedicated person checked his email 374 times in one day.
Welcome to Philosopher Insights, the podcast that delivers wisdom in minutes a day that you can put into practice daily and strive to master over a lifetime.
The podcast committed to sharing ideas that encourage you to bridge the gap between who you are today and the person you aspire to be in the future.
Hi, my name is Herb Lamba, and welcome to my podcast where I will share practical insights from the world's best authors.
Knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is. The quest to become the best version of you starts right now.
Hi, and welcome to Philosopher Insights. My name is Herb Lamba. Today we're discussing attention span, a groundbreaking way to restore balance, happiness, and productivity. The author of this book, Gloria Mark, and the book is published in 2023. So I wanted to share a number of my favorite insights from this book, starting with the dangers of multitasking, attention states, frequency of interruptions, fast edits and executive function, thieves of attention, becoming meta-aware, and then finish it off with design your day for balance. So let's start with the introduction. Quote, a new type of behavior has emerged with the rise of computing, where we dynamically switch our attention among different apps, screens, and devices. As a research scientist, I've been fortunate in that I have been able to watch and empirically track this pattern of attention switching, and with it, stress and exhaustion build up over the last 20 years as we become more reliant on our devices. Simply put, our use of personal technologies affects our ability to pay attention. What I have seen is that in the last 2 decades, human minds have collectively undergone a striking change in how they focus on information. In the thousands of hours that I've studied people in the course of their daily work, I have heard a common sentiment. People report that they are overworked and exhausted because they have to deal with so much information and too many messages. We will see in this book that distractions are not just due to the notifications popping up across the screens or the chimes of their phones. Surprisingly, people are nearly as often distracted by something within themselves, a thought, a memory, an urge to look up information for a desire to connect with others. When you are immersed in the world's largest candy store, it is hard to resist sampling the wares. By spending so much time immersed, we have developed new habits, expectations, and cultural practices, which in turn have led many to ask, how can we take back control of our attention in this digital world? End quote. Well, today in this wonderful book, I'd like to address a growing concern that I believe warrants our attention: the increasing problem of attention hijacking in our society. The issue seems to be escalating rapidly with potentially serious consequences for cognitive development and mental well-being. What's most concerning is the impact on younger generations. There's a real risk that these young minds aren't getting the opportunity to develop crucial skills like sustained focus and deep concentration. The long-term implications of this trend are worrying. Why? Because many young people may not fully grasp the potential dangers of having their attention constantly diverted. Even adults struggle with maintaining focus in this environment, highlighting the severity of this issue. That is why I am excited to introduce you to Attention Span by Gloria Mark, a groundbreaking book that addresses the critical issue of declining attention spans in our digital age. Dr. Mark, a renowned expert on distraction and multitasking, offers valuable insights and practical strategies to help us regain control of our focus and improve our overall well-being. Let's begin with the first insight. Insight number 1, dangers of multitasking. Quote, multitasking has repeatedly been shown to be associated with lower performance when objectively measured. There are also other downsides of multitasking. There is a switch cost, the time lost because whenever you switch your attention, you need to reorient to the new task at hand. The cost would not be so high if you immediately picked up an interrupted project, but unfortunately our data show that we don't. Rather, we switch our attention to at least 2 other projects with over a 25-minute lag before we return to that interrupted task. Yet another cost of multitasking is that it is associated with negative emotions, anxiety, stress, and burnout. End quote. Now I know that we've discussed similar topics before, but here's the thing. As humans, we often need to hear important information multiple times before it really sinks in and we start to act on it. Think about it. How many times have you read or heard something and thought, oh, that's interesting, only to forget about it a day later? We're all guilty of this. Our brains are wired to need repetition and reinforcement, especially when it comes to changing habits or adopting new behaviors. That's why it's so valuable to revisit these ideas from different angles and through various sources. So let's do just that. Remember in Deep Work by Cal Newport, he says, quote, "The problem this research identifies with this work strategy is that when you switch from some task A to another task B, your attention doesn't immediately follow. A residue of your attention remains stuck thinking about the original task. People experiencing attention residue after switching tasks are likely to demonstrate poor performance on that next task. And the more intense the residue, the worse the performance." End quote. And how about this gem from Nir Eyal in his great book Indistractable, where he says, quote, "By thinking of yourself as indistractable, you empower yourself through your identity. You can also use this identity as a rationale to tell others why you do strange things, like meticulously plan your time, refuse to respond to every notification immediately, or put a sign on your screen when you don't want to be disturbed." End quote. All of these great minds have one consistent message to share. Getting control of your attention is vital to your success and your well-being. Insight number 2, attentional states. Quote, "When people are highly engaged and highly challenged, we call this an attentional state of focus. Focus represents a temporal state when people feel absorbed in an activity and the activity requires some degree of challenge to a person's skill set. When people are highly engaged but not at all challenged, we call this rote attentional state. Rote activity is mechanical and routine. It is easy and can absorb our attention. When people are not very engaged and not very challenged, we call this a state of boredom. Boring activities just don't provide much stimulation, making it difficult to concentrate on the activity. And last, when people are highly challenged but not engaged in what they are doing, we label this a state of frustration in their work, feeling like they are banging their head against a wall and not making progress." End quote. Dr. Mark's research reveals fascinating insights into our daily attention patterns. According to her findings, our attention isn't static, but fluctuating. Dr. Mark's research revealed distinct attention patterns throughout the day. Peak focus, 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. across professions. Rote activities begins around 9 a.m. and peak boredom starts around 1 p.m. Now these findings suggest most people start with routine tasks, experience high productivity mid-morning and mid-afternoon, and face a post-lunch slump. Understanding these patterns can help us optimize our daily schedules for better productivity and engagement. Now I found that my peak focus times differ from what Dr. Mark's research shows. I'm most productive right after waking and around 8 a.m. when I start my work. Recognizing this, I've developed a habit of setting myself to do not disturb at 8 a.m. to tackle my number one priority. This simple change has been incredibly effective. The key is understanding your personal attention patterns. You see, by identifying when you're naturally most focused or prone to distraction, you optimize your schedule accordingly. This self-awareness allows you to align demanding tasks with your peak attention periods and potentially boosting your productivity and satisfaction. Insight number 3, frequency of interruptions. Quote, "Over the years in our studies, the number one cause that participants reported for interruptions, both external and internal, was email. We found that our study participants averaged checking their inboxes 74 times a day. Replicating a year later in another study where we logged the computer activity of 40 people for 12 workdays and found that they checked their email an average of 77 times a day. One dedicated person checked his email 374 times in one day." End quote. Here, Dr. Mark's findings are indeed alarming. We're not just victims of external distractions. What's crazy is we often interrupt ourselves voluntarily, especially to check email. This self-interrupting behavior, combined with frequent brief social media checks, 38 Facebook visits daily, averaging 18 seconds each, paints a concerning picture of our fragmented attention spans. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that these habits significantly challenge our ability to maintain our focus and engage deeply with tasks, highlighting the need for better attention management strategies in our digital age. Okay, so let's not stop there. Here's another compelling reason to curb email distractions. Dr. Mark's study found that people who were blocked from checking email experienced significant benefits. Not only did their focus time increase, but heart rate monitors showed that they were less stressed by the week's end. This highlights how constant email checking impacts both our productivity and, again, it impacts our well-being. Insight number 4, fast edits and executive function. Quote, "Research shows that fast edits may wear down the ability of our executive function. If you recall, executive function, the governor of the mind, is responsible for many things, among them inhibiting responses. So if your executive function is too taxed, then it may not be able to work effectively to stop you from impulsively clicking on the email icon." End quote. You see, recent studies reveal a concerning trend. The rapid-fire editing style in modern videos and TV shows is actually impacting our cognitive functions. Those quick cuts and jump edits are taxing our brain's executive function, which is so crucial for decision-making and impulse control. And as a result, we see a decrease in people's ability to resist impulses and maintain focus for extended periods. This isn't just about entertainment preferences. It's actively reshaping how our brains process information and maintain attention. Now, this finding underscores the profound influence media consumption can have on our cognitive abilities, suggesting we might need to be more mindful of our viewing habits and their potential long-term effects on our focus and decision-making skills. Insight number 5, thieves of attention. Quote, "So given all the complexity that exists in the digital world, how can we act with agency? How can we behave in a way consistent with our higher level goals? Let's step back first and remember that we don't use technology in a vacuum. Our attention is subject to so many influences beyond the self. It is bound up in a complex relationship with multiple factors, both internal and external, to use that guide, enable, and constrain our attention in the digital world." End quote. So here, Dr. Mark is highlighting something really important. Yes, we have the power to make our own decisions, but it's not as simple as just willpower alone. We're up against a pretty formidable combination of factors. First, we've got to contend with the habits we've formed and the emotions that drive us. These aren't always easy to overcome. As challenging as that can be, we're not just fighting ourselves. We're also up against some seriously sophisticated technology. Those social media algorithms, they're designed specifically to grab and hold our attention, and they're getting better at it all the time. Now remember that there are teams of very intelligent people whose job is to create apps and features that keep us hooked. They're constantly refining their techniques to make their products more addictive. So while we do have agency, exercising it effectively means being aware of all these factors. It's about recognizing that our attention is valuable, and there are forces out there actively trying to capture it. Insight number 6, becoming meta-aware. Quote, "In order to maintain an internal balance, you will need to develop agency to control your attention. And you also need to internalize this into your daily practice. Being in control of your attention means, first of all, developing a conscious awareness of how you use it. You can learn to practice meta-awareness of your actions, which is a powerful technique for bringing your attention and actions to a conscious level, enabling you then to be more intentional in your choices. Meta-awareness means knowing what you are experiencing as it is unfolding, like when you are conscious of your choice to switch screens from work to read the New York Times. If you have been on TikTok and failed to realize how much time has passed, or you have fallen down a rabbit hole on the internet, then you lacked meta-awareness of your behavior." End quote. Now, to be honest, I find this concept of meta-awareness and its role in managing our attention fascinating and increasingly relevant in our digital age. Let's dive a little bit deeper into this topic. Meta-awareness, as described here, is essentially being conscious of our own cognitive processes and behaviors as they're happening. It's like having an internal observer that notices and monitors our thoughts, feelings, and actions in real time. Now, it is worth noting that developing meta-awareness isn't just about catching ourselves when we're distracted. It's also about becoming more attuned to our internal states and external environment. This heightened awareness can lead to better decision-making and more intentional living. Insight number 7. Design your day for balance. Quote, "The traditional practice of scheduling a day is to write down tasks to work on. It's what most of us have always done. Often what people do is write down meetings and deadlines in their calendars, make a to-do list, and sometimes even assign a start and stop time for each task. With this traditional practice, one thinks in terms of sticking to a schedule and finishing tasks. We need to instead relearn what designing a day should be in the 21st century digital world. It should include strategies to not exhaust yourself and to improve your well-being, and it includes understanding your own rhythm of attentional states and the fact that you have limited and precious cognitive resources." End quote. Isn't it fascinating how easily we fall into reactive patterns, especially first thing in the morning? Many of us instinctively reach for our phones upon waking, immediately surrendering control to external influences like social media, news, or work emails. But we can shift this dynamic. By intentionally designing our day, we can prioritize ourselves first. It's about creating a routine that puts our well-being at the forefront. Here's another interesting point. Most to-do lists have a glaring omission: ourselves. We plan for work and errands but often forget to include self-care or personal growth. What if we change this? Imagine starting each day with "take care of myself" as the first item on the list. This could be meditation, exercise, or simply enjoying a screen-free breakfast. The key is choosing where our attention goes rather than letting it be hijacked by external demands. By prioritizing ourselves, we set a positive tone for the entire day, potentially improving our effectiveness and resilience. You know, it's amazing how sometimes the simplest messages can have the biggest impact. When I shared this idea about intentionally designing our days at my company, I was honestly blown away by the response. It was like I'd struck a chord that was just waiting to resonate. The flood of messages I got afterwards were so eye-opening for myself. So many colleagues reached out to share their own struggles with balancing work and personal time, or to tell me how this perspective had been a little bit of a wake-up call for them. Now that really drove home how universal this challenge is in our always-on, hyper-connected world. What really hit me was realizing how many of us are in the same boat, trying to navigate our busy lives without a compass. We're so focused on meeting everyone else's expectations that we sometimes forget to take care of ourselves. It's like we're writing the story of our day and leaving out the main character. This experience really reinforced for me how crucial it is to prioritize ourselves in our daily planning. We simply cannot afford to design our days without putting ourselves at the center. Well, that concludes the insights that I wanted to share from Attention Span by Gloria Mark. If you resonated with these insights, I would highly recommend going back and listening to some of my other episodes. Episode 43, Deep Work by Cal Newport. Episode 79, The One Thing by Gary Keller. Episode 103, Stolen Focus by Johan Hari. And Episode 26, Peak Mind by Amishi Jha. Remember, stay curious and keep embracing the wonders of knowledge. Talk to you soon. You've been listening to Philosopher Insights with your host, Herb Lambert. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.